My name is Dave Holden, and let's see, how many people walked here tonight?
Walked here today.
Okay, and everybody else drove?
Yeah, because walking back would have been in the dark, and I'm not walking in the back where I have to walk in the dark, because
You are
the
no-
coyotes sing back
You are
there.
no dummy, I can see that.
Coyotes sing, and I don't want to cross paths.
The reason why I ask is because it means that you're most likely already familiar with old roads, and you just don't know it. Because most of our public roads, whether it be streets or even the long distance roads, were originally Indian trails. And people forget that because it's a long time ago, and our society doesn't seem to play that out. And so I like to point that out so that people realize that they're more familiar with ancient trails, old roads, than they think they are. And what I like to do is I wrote a piece here called Ancient Trails, Old Roads, and Paths to the Future. I like to read from it and then answer questions pretty much as I go along. Many of you will mistakenly believe that you know little of old roads and archaic trails. You may even think that they are unusual or even rare. You will be wrong on both counts. You drove or walked here on routes or streets that have been used by many for untold centuries, and they are actually very common. They range from the well-known and well-used county, state, and town roads to the faint corridor of a remnant old farm road fading into woods that were once a meadow and is now overgrown, and the barely discernible crease of an old quarry road curving across a modern lawn. While these paths of history indeed surround us, they are disappearing as towns grow and development encroaches on wood and field. I have ideas on how we can slow this process down, but first we have to understand what our archaic trails and old roads are. In my own path, as a child in Maine in the 1950s, I loved to follow old roads, which seemed to be lost to everyone else, but to my fertile imagination, teemed with Indian and settler traffic. In the late 1980s, I met Alf Evers, Woodstock's historian and author of several books about Woodstock and the Catskills. And as time went by, we grew to be good friends who shared many interests: love of the land, an appreciation of maps, and a deep fascination with old roads. As I was avidly exploring Woodstock's backwoods, I would tell Alf of the many roads, blueberry, farm, mill, and quarry roads, that I found, and realized now he was exploring vicariously through me, because he couldn't do it anymore due to his failing health. And I expected him to be familiar with many of the old roads, or if not, to at least know where to find references for them, or maps of them. Much to both of our chagrin, it turns out that most of Woodstock's old road maps were lost when the town of Shandaken separated from Woodstock. I think it was 1820. The upshot of this realization was that I vowed to map out all the old roads of Woodstock. Little did I know what I was getting into. I thought I could do the entirety of town in 10 or 15 years, and now 20 years have gone by and there's still much to do. In exploring our backwoods, it becomes apparent rapidly that this entire area was a very busy place in relatively modern times. And by the way, let me also make clear that while most of my experience absolutely is specific to Woodstock. And much of what I'm going to talk about here tonight pertains to this area also, and a lot of areas where these were the lifelines of historic America. All these roads and trails. It becomes apparent rapidly that this entire area was a very busy place in relatively modern times, meaning 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. These hills, valleys, and mountains are threaded with hundreds upon hundreds of what we consider old roads now, many of which were new not that long ago, made to promote the movement of quarried bluestone and farm products to market and mill. However, some roads were already old when settlers arrived, long used by natives. The old Wagonk Road is one of these. I'll show you on a map. Believed by Alf to be the earliest road from Kingston to Woodstock. He also believed with good cause that Wagonk was the original name for Woodstock. But the road up connected Kingston. The Wagonk Road was an old road that was lost for the longest time. It connected the overlook quarries with the rondout where the stone would be dressed and shipped out. Because don't forget, it was the sidewalks of all the eastern cities. I think as far west as at least Pittsburgh. I think some of the sidewalks of Cleveland are also Catskills bluestone. The Wagonk Road was very definitely used as a popular bluestone road in the 19th century, evidenced by deep ruts the quarry carts made. Another very old road adapted to modern use was what was called the Wistbell Road, which went from Blake Hill in Woodstock over the pass on Mount Tobias to Wittenberg Road. Used as a vital connector between the burgeoning population of Little Shandaken, as Lake Hill was then known, and the hamlet of Wittenberg, it was widened to become a major thoroughfare. What is most interesting about this now abandoned road is that it was once part of a vital native trade route between the St. Lawrence Valley and the Delaware. It was called the Old South Road, and little evidence exists for it now, except for Wistbell Road, Mink Hollow Road, and the Old Mine Road, which we call Route 209 now. In addition to the long-distance paths, there were also many that were used for more localized, immediate purposes, like moving from village to village. These footpaths sometimes followed ridge lines for summer use, because they're cooler, catching more wind, or along valley floors for winter usage, out of the wind. Other, no less important routes ran along either side of major streams. The Sawkill, for instance, has an old road or trail on either bank, as does the Esopus. Of course, fording places were used wherever it was practicable. These historic trails that became modern roads, whether major or minor routes, were used over long periods of time, far preceding the current era, and every step should be taken to make sure they are preserved and protected from the type of encroachment that has destroyed permanently so much of our heritage. What became known as Ulster County was the nexus of this old trail network, with its focus being the rondout, where all these ways converged. Probably the most traveled and utilized path in our region is a river path, the Hudson. While it might seem that there is little evidence left of its historic use for travel, all one has to do is to study the high proliferation of native sites which surround it. In particular, for the purposes of this study, the mouths of both the Esopus and the rondout show that this is the case. Many archaeological finds at the mouth of both the Esopus and the rondout. In addition, along the Esopus Ridge, the ridge that runs between Kingston and Saugerties, much evidence has been found of flint working on a large scale from the exposed major horizons of high-quality chert throughout the strata. Right there is a major item that was in great demand in our region. Ideal for arrowheads, hand tools, and spearheads, it was probably exported in all directions by land and by water. Whatever tribe or confederacy of tribes that controlled these mines had to have been very powerful in their time, and I'm sure would have insisted on controlling the routes over which they were exported. So they were probably dominant in both the land and maritime environments. Part of that dominance would most likely have induced included control of heights of land, the mountain passes that the land trails would have to navigate to access the other watersheds in their trails. Most obviously and importantly of these in our area would have been the high pass of what is now called High Mount, where 28 goes over, connecting the watersheds of the Esopus Creek and the upper Delaware River, and the pass at the top of Mink Hollow Road, vital for connecting the watersheds of the Esopus and the Schoharie Creek, the Mohawk River. This road was also vital as part of the Old South Road. In another article at a later date, I will expound upon other interesting features associated with old roads and trails. There's a lot of stone structures associated with mountain passes and trails. Sometimes cairns would neatly stacked stones would be set up to mark trails. Sometimes they would be, there's dolmens, just huge rocks put on smaller rocks that mark some of the passes and watersheds. And there's a lot of very interesting stuff. And like the Indians used to make what they call trail trees. They would bend over a young tree, tie it down, and so that it would point to a side trail, like to where the location of a spring, which to long distance travelers was very important to know where the springs were. And another interesting feature locally is something called the Hammonasset Line. It marks the winter solstice sunrise. And it goes all the way across Connecticut and cuts through our area. Interestingly, all along it are many lithic structures, many probably important ceremonial sites. And in the one high pass, it happens to cross the one high pass in Stony Clove, where Devil's Tombstone is, which I think is quite the coincidence. One lesson we can all learn from these old trails as they wind along the valleys, coursing over high passes, is an appreciation that they are an integral part of the land. The old ways were made in such a manner as to work with the landscape, to curve around the shoulder of a mountain, or gently angle across a small valley, to work with nature, not forcing it out of the way. Just as the ancients learned to travel these paths for family or business, it is also safe to assume they enjoyed the beauty of the land as they passed through it. We need to relearn the ability to love the land as we use it. I think it is important, this is the path to the future part. I think it is important for us to work diligently to preserve the remaining paths, as Vermont has done in enacting a law that prohibits old town roads from being deeded to private individuals, which unfortunately happens in New York State. A number of these old roads you're not allowed on because they're technically private property. Now they were deeded to private property owners. And but Vermont, by enacting a law that prohibits old town roads from being deeded to private individuals, ensured rights of way. New York could learn a lot from this. Converting unused rail lines to rail trails is also proving to be viable in every aspect, economically and recreationally. In particular, I would like to see a Woodstock Old Road project. How perfect. Warp. Initiated in order to finish mapping out all the old roads and archaic trails in Woodstock. Maybe someday there will be similar groups at the county and state level. I think it'd be great if people started, maybe somebody is doing this in Dutchess County. You know, I haven't heard about it. Also, I believe we should encourage the creation of new hiking and walking trails, eventually knitting them all together into an alternative network for healthy travel close to the land. By doing so, we and those in the future can continue to appreciate the incredible beauty and rich history of our region. Anybody have any questions?
When you're mapping the old trails, what method are you using? Are you looking at old maps from different time periods and then kind of like transposing it, or are you just?
I just have to find them and mark them down. You know, I'll use an altimeter, and pretty much, I'm really good with dead reckoning.
Mm.
I know the lay of the land.
So, like ones that are historic, maybe not from Native American times, but more recent. Like, are you able to gain any knowledge of like what they were used for, what they were called in the past? Like,
Yes and no. A lot of that's lost now,
yeah.
and that's what I'm trying to prevent from happening. I wish that earlier on that I had consciously tried to interview more of the old timers that knew that stuff. Like every major quarry had a name. You know, we know the California quarry in Woodstock, but there's all the other quarries had names, and I know a few of them. And the same thing with these old roads. A lot of the roads in town have names. I'm playing catch up on that before that gets lost. And they were also used in different times. Some of them, okay, like Route 28. It's one of its nicknames is the old plank road because it was always wet, and they had to lay down planks. It was the only way. Because it was never meant to be a year-round place of travel. On the ridge between, okay, 28 goes down in Stony Hollow. Then there's a hill. Then the Sauk Hill on the other side, Sauk Hill Stream on the other side. Well, on the top of that hill is an old road called the Woods Road. And that was the road that was used during the wet season. They wouldn't use 28. It was unnavigable. But you know, modern humans, we have to go the way we want to go, and we'll make the land conform to what we want. You know, how we want it to. Just a lot of it's just dead wreck. I mean, like quarry roads are pretty easy to figure. They're coming out of quarries, for one thing. And quarry carts are only that wide because the product is so heavy and so dense. A quarry cart can only hold 4 or 5 tons, and when it's a lot, but it's concentrated and it's dense. It's not like a farm road will be at least 6 feet between the wheels, because it can be, because the load can be it's lighter and distributed more widely.
So you can guess at what the road was used for. By
Correct.
its width.
Correct. And what really helps with the quarry roads too is they are sometimes deeply rutted into the stone.
Mm.
Okay.
The way.
And it's also not just rutting, because they would also carve the ruts out, because it would help keep the wagons on track.
Mm.
It must have been. I've read a lot about the bluestone industry, and it was a heartbreaking, back-breaking, very difficult time. All the creatures, I mean, mules and horses. When you're going up a hill, sure, you had, usually with an empty wagon, a quarry cart, the horses would be on the front. But coming down a mountain with a load of bluestone, the team of horses is going to be in the back. And there'd be people going ahead of the wagon, making sure the trail was clear. And there's stories about like one horse or mule slipped and the whole load would go. And animals would die, stone would get broken, and people would get hurt. It was a very serious time. Dawn to dusk, most of the year. Sir?
Excuse me, which way were the horses hooked up in the rear? Were they facing uphill or downhill?
No, they'd be facing downhill, they'd be pulling back.
So they have to be pushing like.
They'd be holding it back as it edges, as the wagon edged downhill.
So without the horses, the wagon would just slide down the hill.
And barrel downhill.
Yeah, barrel down
Yeah.
the hill. It's better.
That doesn't seem the way a horse should be utilized. I don't think does a horse have power to do that?
Sure.
Does it?
And I think they would use a different kind of shoe also, that would get more of a grip than, I've seen them, they had a rougher texture than your normally like smoother modern horseshoe.
Have you seen remnants of shanties along the quarry roads?
No. And there's a place in Lewis Hollow that's figuratively called the Irish Village because that's where a lot of the Irish lived when they were working up in Lewis Hollow and California Quarry. There's almost no evidence of it. A couple foundations. There's actually one building that's still in existence there that was a boarding house. But they were basically, don't forget, basically itinerant. They might have had a floor. And, but no real foundation. It'd be maybe on stone pilings, but maybe not. And many times they were just tents. They lived year round. It was better than starving to death in Ireland. And what I'd like to see sometime is, if you've ever seen the movie Gangs of New York. Okay, so that was a real depiction of that period in the city. But what it doesn't show is that more than half of the Irish, as they were coming through, would catch, sloops upriver because they knew they could get work in the quarries.
Mm-hmm. And the canal even before.
Yep.
Even before the Great Hunger, there was a lot of Irish that came up and
That's
worked on the
correct.
canal.
That's correct. It was quite the time. But it's kind of interesting how it all fits together too, because about 1905 is when, in 1905 is when bluestone started fading because of Rosendale limestone, Rosendale cement. And everybody suddenly wanted to have cement sidewalks. Of course, that only lasted X amount of time until Portland cement came, which you could set when wet, set underwater. And but interestingly, a lot of the Irish started building the reservoir, and not just building it, they became its security. And when the reservoir was done, they went to the city, and it was a major component of the Irish police in the city. It's interesting how it all ties together sometimes, No, but nobody should ever. I don't ever want to see anybody romanticize the Bluestone era because. And in the early days when it was all hand drilling, and all the drill was just a very long chisel. And one person held it. Your best friend in the universe was swinging the hammer. Because if you broke your hand, you were done on every level. There was probably no other work for you. There was no medical care. Just home, herbal stuff. if you're, you know, a man's wife and children would have to find other sustenance. It was a very, and it at that time in Woodstock, the women worked up in the Overlook Hotel, and now there's a trip, because they walked up the mountain and down the mountain night and day, no matter what the weather, 3 seasons of the year. And I explored. There was this rumor, old rumor. I think it's probably based on fact, a legend perhaps of what's called the staircase, which was the means that they took to get up to the hotel from down in Lewis Hollow. And I would sit out in the big meadows down at John Joy Field with binoculars in the winter, trying to look for a staircase. And I explored Lewis, which is a big hollow. I explored it on foot, but over and over again. And I finally realized it was ironic Celtic humor. They wished it was a staircase. And I finally did find one old road that angles straight up, and then they probably cut across over to the hotel. But talk about rough. I'm just picturing these women, probably in groups as much as they could, with one lantern, maybe 2 lanterns, trying not to slip and slide in the rain or in snow at the fall or spring, fog, clouds. It was really it would make a great movie, a great story if somebody could do it right. And the bluestone industry just got even more interesting after the Civil War, once black powder came around. And literally there were hundreds of tons of unused black powder left after the Civil War. Unfortunately, with no manuals. Okay? And meaning that it was dangerous enough before to quarry bluestone. And usually where black powder was a help was in blowing off the top, in the soil, the trees, to clear it off and then see what the stone is like. That was the other forlorn part. It used to take a week or 2, depending on how many people, how big the site was, before they even knew if the stone was going to be marketable. They could work for 2 weeks to do that, and then the stone not be marketable. And so finally, when black powder came around, they could blow the top off of it. And there's stories in Woodstock in that period of how from down in the valley, not only would the overlook be shrouded in dust 3/4 of the year, but you'd hear incessantly boom, 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 boom of the black powder. But there's also other stories too about, somebody stuffed some black powder in a hole. Oh, it went out. Here, I'll go get it. Yeah. And no better medical care than a few years earlier. But the quarries are beautiful. I love to explore them, and the roads. What happens with the quarry roads now is they grow thick with moss, 4 or 6 inches thick with moss. And they're beautiful. They're fun and quiet to walk on. And what I'm going to show you is both some of the old roads and some of the things we see as we explore the old roads. This is a cairn. And this is very stone wall with a bunch of cairns around it. Very interesting site.
Would the stone wall be a farming wall?
Well, you know,
Or
here's
would
the
it be-
here's
would
the
it be,
inter-
Native American.
The interesting thing here is the stone wall is not related to other stone walls. It forms a huge rectangle with about 60 acres inside it and about 100 dry stone cairns inside it, not outside of it.
Mm.
We believe, I'm a member of NERA, New England Antiquities Research Association, and we've been researching these things for a while. They're all over the eastern United States in clusters and lines and all different types. And I believe that this was a burial. But archaeologists are starting to realize now that the Indians did work with stone. And both in stacking, but for different purposes, like burial. And a number of stone structures have astronomical purposes, which is very interesting. It's, quite a number of them line up with the solstices, equinoxes, and some of them even look like animals and even mirror constellations in the sky. Oops, I mean,
Have these areas been given a specific name as a group besides?
some have, some have, and some haven't. I mean, some of them are on private property where people don't want public access. I get permission from people. I know a lot of people in Woodstock. Veronica knows.
Yeah, we went traipsing through somebody's backyard to look at these. I
Yeah.
don't, not these ones specifically.
But see here, you can see in the background, there's getting further. This is the challenge about it, is to try to do it when the leaves are not on, is when you get a better view. But this is a situation where actually there's 6 or 7 of these in a straight line that happen to follow the summer solstice line. Which is,
And you think these are burials?
no, I think these are markers. I think
These
those
are-
are. I think those are markers.
Okay, those are astrological.
Well, they were carefully placed stones as opposed to like cairns that built up over time. in terms of-
Cairns don't build up over time. That would be a pile of stones. The difference between a cairn, and a pile of stones, cairn is dry stone, neatly stacked.
Right, okay.
And pile of stones is exactly that. This is a trail I built on Burcliff in Woodstock.
And when you built that, were you following a path that was already there?
Nope,
or-
nope, this is a brand new trail I made.
When you make a new trail, do you ever follow a deer path?
Oh, yes, I'll
Yeah.
follow anything that's already made. Part of this trail actually goes on 2 different old roads.
Okay,
I'll always try to use an already disturbed
right.
area.
Are there a lot of old carriage trails up there? There are in this area, that's why I
Right,
asked.
not specifically. Up on the top of the mountain is what's called the carriage road. But then again, the major roads were all carriage roads. Route 212.
Yeah, I was thinking more of state roads that were carriage roads.
Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So one of the trails I built as a volunteer. Actually, want to slow it down. I said I wanted to slow it down. No, see, I happen to be a real map freak, and both of historic and modern. And it's helped me research a lot of the old roads, because a number of them will be on the maps. And they'll look like, when people look at old maps and they see a road where everybody knows there's no road now, they think it's just like somebody was just like playing with a map. But no, it'll show the real, the reality. And as an example, this is Mink Hollow. Keep in mind, this is in a map about 1798 or 1800, when Woodstock was called Wagok. Probably an Algonquin word that we believe meant land or waterfalls under the mountain. And this is what's now called Mink Hollow. Mink Hollow Road only goes up about this far. But you notice here, it goes all the way over to Hunter. And that's part of that old South Road that I was telling you about. What this map doesn't show is that it also continued over this way down under what's now the reservoir now. This is a quarry called Snake Rocks. This is one of the trails I built on town-owned property. It was a volunteer.
Does the trail have a name?
Well, it's actually the West Trail at Como, the town-owned Como
Como.
property. This is a huge, huge cairn. There's a set of 7 of these cairns up there, 150 feet long, 50 feet wide.
Wow.
It's actually one of the most outstanding sets of structures in the eastern United States. I've shown it to, I've had the New York State Museum, I've had archaeologists, friends, anthropologist friends came down and investigated this site. Other friends that have studied structures like this up and down the East Coast.
Where is that located?
This is up in Lewis Hollow, on the side of Overlook.
The large cairn you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. It's the same, it's actually the same, this is, I think, the other end of the same cairn. You can see it goes the whole length of the picture.
Wow.
Do you
Yeah.
have a guess as to the purpose?
Hmm?
Do you have a guess as to the purpose of it? Or you're not sure?
You know, it's, I think it might have been burial also. There's evidence that there were several chambers in it. But it gets it can get extremely speculative, and I'm only an amateur. And, let's put it this way, the only other cairns like it, anything like these cairns anywhere in the world are like 4,000 years old. And they're from Western Europe.
These are pretty shallow. I mean, they're not tall.
Correct. And there's evidence that the top of them, interestingly, is concave. Now, it may have been, again, it may have been chambered, but then with it, see, there's chambers down in Putnam County that are still extant, the roofs are still solid, but that's because it's granite. What happens with the bluestone all over, it's the west side of the river, it's frangible, it wears down over time, and a stone roof made out of bluestone would collapse eventually, and that may be what happened here. It also could have been looted. Looting was a big, there was, everybody thought there was something inside these type of things in the 1800s. More likely they were wrong, because if anybody had been buried in it, was so long ago that mice and other small animals ate the bones. But the Great Cairns are very interesting, and they were under threat of being developed, of being sold to a developer. But I found somebody that has bought this land and is preserving them.
Wow.
So there's a chance that as time goes by, we might be able to figure out what they are.
Was this an Algonquin area or a Mohican area or?
It would have been the Lenape.
Oh, this
Well,
had been the
well,
Lenape?
Algonquin is the language group.
Right, that's right.
Everybody east of the Rockies spoke different, hundreds of different dialects of Algonquin. And the local tribes over by me were the Lenape and actually the Mohican. The Mohican dominated this side of the river, but they also they went over to the base of the Catskills too. It's my friends Stuart and Susan.
Have human remains been identified?
No, that's what I was. Well, for one thing, they haven't really been explored. And I doubt that they would be extant because of mice. And bones are usually in archaeological sites. Bones that are usually found are usually encased in mud.
Right, box and
Right.
island, for instance.
Right. There's an old road. This is at Como also. Hopefully we won't see any more of that stuff till at least 6 months, 7. Has everybody had enough snow?
Yes, yeah. Kind of cold.
Okay, that is a road that goes up there and curves up on the and that is, I have to say, I'll give myself credit, it's not always easy to see how it curves up there. It's not always easy to identify old roads. I have a pretty good knack for it. All right, this is another site with smaller, a cairn field. All in the distance. Some of them will be more disturbed, than others. What's interesting is always springs, all the ones associated with burial always have springs around. And I think it has something to do with returning. If you consider that every native culture around the world considers springs sacred, as we should, it is not just a source of life, it is the embodiment of life. I suspect that the burial cycle may have been to return the loved one to where everything started. This is the California quarry in Woodstock, all the quarry rubble. And you'll notice the birches. Birches are a pioneer. They're one of the first trees that'll take advantage of an open space. One of the ways that I find quarries on the side of the mountains is if I see a patch of birches, I know that there's a quarry there. Of course, the birches don't end up, a lot of times they don't end up living that long. They're the first one in there, but for some reason they don't.
Is sumac often an indicator too? Sumac trees?
What's that?
The sumac trees, are they often an indicator too?
I don't know. Sumac are like they'll grow anywhere.
Oh, okay, they're
Yeah.
two pioneers.
Yeah, I would. That's my opinion. I'm not positive about that. Also, California quarry.
So there's a road that goes up, or like an ancient.
Well, not so
or
old.
ancient necessarily, but
Right.
a quarry road that goes
Yep.
up to that quarry.
There's actually a pair of them. I think I've got a picture of it here.
Were all quarry roads made of stone?
Were they what?
Stone roads, the quarry roads.
Like where
They
they
had tracks, so were they stone or were they just?
Well, yeah, they would be in bedrock.
They were all bit, okay.
Yes, it would have to be to hold, if you think about holding the weight.
Yeah, yeah.
And, it's interesting though, on every ledge, yes, there might be a more modern era road, but on the outside of the ledge, there'll always, many times there'll be trails. And I think many of the trails will be older. There's another site, actually an old road that goes up in the middle there, up to a bunch of cairns all over. Now this is a very interesting site. This is related to the Great Cairns. You'll notice it goes back and then ends. What's very interesting is that about the time I realized that it was a snake effigy cairn. See, tribes all over the country built different structures to honor different animals, to maybe to represent different clans. And it took me a while to realize that this was a snake, because this face of it, it's actually south, facing you. It was opened up, almost like a mouth.
Right.
And the wall goes back, and you'll see it takes a right jink, and then just finished. I mean, I looked at this thing, walked by this thing. It's really very isolated. There is no agricultural purpose. Absolutely, I'm trying to think, sheep shearing ramp or something. No. And, well, it turns out 200 yards to the north is another one, almost identical, facing in the opposite direction. Now, what kind of like the caduceus. I mean, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting site. This is on that same site where the Great Cairns are. And we think there's a lot going on there.
Is it an approximate south facing, or is it?
Yes, no, it's the two of them are on a due north-south line, not magnetic, but polar.
Really?
Yes. And the others, the seven great cairns that come up, this is on the penultimate level. This is up at about 1,500 foot. The great cairns go up from 1,100 up to about 1,300. All these structures are all due north-south.
Wow.
And what was interesting was right when we were trying to figure out, we had the state came down, the museum came down and GPS the site for us. The 7 cairns, the 2 snake effigy cairns, and there's about 60 associated mid-sized cairns, and all in this one area, and separated by a stone wall from the rest of the universe. And it's pretty obvious to us that there was something special to somebody, so we. And I'm trying to think. I was reading about how all around the world there's stone structures that are made to mirror constellations. And so I'm thinking seven sisters, Pleiades. And my friend Glenn, partner in this who's more of a techie than I, puts it into a program, we were floored. Draco.
Oh, yeah.
It's the constellation Draco, with the head of the snake, the snake cairns. It's pretty coincidental, isn't it? You know. And what was interesting was that, again, 3,500 years ago, the constellation Draco and its dominant star, which I can't remember right off, was the pole star and was used for navigation. So it might help us date this, you know, and it, you know, like I said, it's interesting. I wouldn't pretend to say that I know.
Just so you should maintain its value of conversation.
Okay. In Kingston, there's these megaliths. This is a site in Kingston, not the best picture.
Kingston City or Kingston Town?
In the city,
Really?
yeah. This is the carriage road going up Overlook. Isn't that neat? Old road disappearing in the woods there. This is Como. It's actually the Mill Road. This is actually shows the part of the Wagog Road. Actually, this is the coal mine up on the side of Overlook.
Can you go inside?
Hmm?
Can you go inside?
Yeah, only about you can only go in about 40 feet,
Oh.
and it's a pool of water in the back there because it's down at an angle, the horizon of the. The things we see on our walks. I saw one of those today. It's great. And this old map also shows a number of these roads. They're not on the modern maps. That's the Wispel Road going down from Lake Hill. And that's the one that goes up like
Oh,
that.
Jockey Hill.
That's the Wagog
That's
Road.
Jockey. That's the town of Kingston.
Right. There's a quarry up there before.
That's where Anna lives up that area. And Henry.
Like I said, the things we see, hopefully we'll be seeing some of them soon. Look at that for a minute.
Looks like a possum.
Looks like a head, doesn't it?
Yeah, looks like a possum looking at it.
Mhm.
His eyes aren't there anymore.
Wood turtle?
Yeah.
Isn't that neat? Probably glacial. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, the other one you hear is farmers in their spare time. Oh yeah, I can see, anybody says that, I can see how much farming they've done.
And
This-
I like to stack rocks up in my spare time.
Yeah. Oops. Actually, you see that cut down there, that's an old road. California Quarry again, I'm just about done.
So much more interesting over here. It's all farming.
Here we are working on the trails at Como. This is actually a private trail I made for somebody. Yeah, there's, oh yeah, the mountain man himself there. No, I lousy picture, but I first gave this talk at the Person House Museum in Kingston, which is really, it's actually a pretty great building if you got a chance to. I recommend anybody go there. I didn't take a bite out of
I was
those.
gonna say, don't eat that one.
Those are that's actually full size. They really were that big. Coming soon, coming soon. Actually, that's a private trail. See, all these years I made trails as volunteers. I only caught on. This is up in California quarry. That's a quarry road. It took me years to catch on to. There we go. Back to the beginning. That's what I was.
The megaliths in Kingston, whereabouts is that located?
Ha 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 ha! For a nominal fee, I'd be glad to.
Oh,
That was my question. Is it public or private land?
It's on public property.
Uh-huh.
It's on property owned by the city of Kingston,
Good.
and fairly readily accessible.
So
But
we can run around to all the different parks in Kingston and try to find it.
you could do that. I would be hard put to explain it to you. It would be easier to show somebody where they were.
And are there opinions about them? Their origins?
Of course, there's always
I mean,
opinions.
archaeologists.
Well, you know, the thing is, what's happening in archaeology is that right now there's a revolution in archaeology. Because the older archaeologists, 1492, period. Nothing happened before 1492. All right, so maybe the Vikings. All right, so you know how hard that was to prove to them? And they don't believe that the Vikings went anywhere besides, Maine, Newfoundland. And whereas now there's more and more evidence that they were all over the New England coast. And in their own sagas, they tell of coming up Stromfjord, a river that flowed both ways. Yeah, yeah. And why not? No, they're just, the younger archaeologists have open minds and are open to the concepts of that the Indians had were a lot more versatile in working with stone and stuff than supposed earlier, and B, that they had a lot more truck with people from other places, because all these cultures, all the worldwide cultures were great seafarers. It's no huge stretch in my mind, and now the archaeologists are like being dragged to admit what's called the salutary hypothesis. They always thought that the oldest stonework, the Clovis stuff, 10,000 years ago in the West, they thought that was it, Bering Strait, or Beringia, Clovis. But now, throughout the East, and even into South America, 20,000 year old stonework identical to European. Blades of all different, very fine work. And so they're starting to accept the fact that maybe it was not as simple as they had always thought it would be. It wasn't just the Bering Land Bridge.
There was an article, I think, in the Times about that in the last week or so.
Yeah, in South America, that was a very interesting article.
Yeah.
Well, the book 1491 discusses that
Yep.
quite a bit.
I mean, there's, you know, I'm a diffusionist. That's what they call someone that believes that all this knowledge was diffused around the world. It wasn't just, didn't happen in the set way that the archaeologists like to. I don't see it as a huge stretch. I want to thank everybody very much.
Thank
know.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
I don't remember now. We were hungry.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.